What is up, ladies? Not fucking ladies, whoop whoop. How's everybody doing tonight? Happy Tuesday, as most Tuesdays are for us. Happy Tuesday. So tonight we're going to talk about, as I said, quad dominance. We're going to talk about why it happens, why especially for us ladies that it happens, and then a little bit into how to correct it, and then also a little bit into our pedal strokes and looking at how to apply it to our bike. Because I don't know about you, but probably if you're listening to this and you have this problem of using mostly your quads, but by the time you get to the top of the climb, or especially if it's a punchy climb or a longer climb for that matter, that your quads are done. They're tapping out. And so we need other things to work for us. We don't just need to use our quads. There's some pretty important things that need to happen. One, we carry around this, and this. Probably should use it, right? We don't just need to use here. And did y'all know that you have one part of your quad that crosses over your hip and is a hip flexor? Did y'all know that? So you have quad is 4, makes sense, quad, and quadriceps is 4 different muscles that come into a common tendon. That common tendon then goes into your kneecap, and then you have another tendon that goes from your kneecap down to the lower part of your leg. What happens is that you use all those 4 different muscles to contract. Those 4 different muscles have 4 different attachment points. 3 of them attach to your femur, your thigh, and 1 comes up and attaches to your pelvis, and that is a hip flexor. And so we use, it's called your rectus femoris, and we use all of those guys whenever we are more quad dominant for it. So just a poll as people are popping on, who is quad dominant here? I used to be. It used to be a pretty significant problem for me. Even whenever I was a teenager, I used to have to have my knees taped. I had tracking issues in my kneecap. Let's just say, I was a floppy mess as I was a teenager. I didn't know what was happening in my body. I was growing, I was an adolescent, and shit just did not work right when it came down to that. And I was training because I wanted to play D1 soccer, and I knew that in middle school. I was kind of a determined individual then. That's just not lie, I'm determined now too. And so I had to go to PT then. There's a reason why I became a PT. It's because I was in PT a lot growing up and throughout my young adult life, that I was a patient a ton. And so I understand a lot of how it is being the patient side of life for that. And so being quad dominant really put a lot of stress for me even. It was putting stress on my knees. It was putting stress on my hips. I was super weak in specific areas that we're going to talk about. And it was really affecting my ability to become a better athlete, to be stronger out on the field, and to basically apply what I knew I needed to do. And so it's a common area for especially us as women for a couple different reasons. So let's now go into kind of why this happens for us. So as women, as we think about our cushioning system, you're going to see more of my lower body in this. As we think of our cushioning system, if you do a jump, where do you tend to cushion? Well, there have been studies that as ladies, females, we have a lot more ACL injuries. We have a lot more knee issues and things of that sort. One of the reasons is because as we come down, we tend to bend more at our knees to come down instead of bending more at our hips. To use our hips more. What do you think that needs for us? To use our hips more versus our knees for shock absorption, even then, what do you think that's needed? So have you guys comment in what muscles are needed for that? So as I said, guys versus girls, in that, females tend to bend at your knees more so, cushion at the knees. Guys tend to cushion at their hips more so. And so you actually do more of that full butt going down squat. And instead of actually using your knees. Yes, really, hip hinge. That's exactly right. To hip hinge better, which is a commonality in a lot of things that you know that I teach, is that we need core strength. If you don't have your core strength going, and not just abs, front and back, then you're not going to be able to use your hips as well. Well, we know that as ladies, we tend to have a little bit wider hips, right? Like, we're just wider as a whole. And so, as we go down to shock absorb, I need core strength to make that ability to use my hips more, to use the power that I have back here, and not just, I almost fell over, and not just bend my knees to come back up. That's easy. All I need is my quads working for that. I don't have to throw in a whole lot of extra stuff. And so, as we think of applying this, why it also happens is that it's just easier for us. It's easier for us to use our knees, for us to use our quads more. But that doesn't mean that it's correct. We also have to think about how our knees, one thing that is also going into play, it's not just like core to hip to using that, it's also where we tend to lie, feet, knees, and hips. And so whether my natural stance is here, my hips are wider, or through that now I have to have a wider stance, and also as I stand on one leg doing different things, I now have a more of a force to hold up on that leg because I am wider here. It's just the same, a 5-pound weight held out here versus a 5-pound weight held here. It's gonna feel a ton heavier here than it is here. Same thing, as I stand on that one leg, I now have to hold a lot more through here or sag down into it. And as you can see, that makes my knee kind of shift inward and puts it at a susceptible range for injuries or just not strengthening it quite right. So, how to start correcting some of this? First off, who's ever heard of these things that you don't move at your hips for your shock absorption quite as well? That we actually have to train young female athletes how to jump better. How to actually absorb into their hips more. It's part of ACL training protocols for making them less likely to tear their ACL. It's part of it. Can you believe that? That we have to retrain how we, as women, as females, are landing, how we jump. And so part of how to correct this is one, just even knowing that's a problem. Now that's kind of like a stupid, duh answer. But if you know it's a problem, then you can train out of it. And so a lot of the typical training programs include a ton of quad work. I mean, you think about it, squats include a lot of quad work, lunges, even if you deadlift from the ground, that first initial press up is a lot of quad work. They actually said that it's more max quad output than doing a squat, than doing even a back squat for it. And so as that first initial lift for your deadlift, you're using a ton of quads. And so how to correct this is that you know it's a problem, and so you train appropriately. Do you actually access your glutes when you are doing your exercises? Do you? Is that a yes or a no? Can you actually access them and utilize them? Or do you go with typical training programs that you see and you find, and at the end of it, you're like, man, I think I need to foam roll my quads. They are dying. Because I just used them in every single exercise that I did for my lower body. Anybody have that feeling? I used to feel that all the time. I didn't think it was a problem until I actually kind of put logic to it. Oh, I don't want to be quad dominant all the time. I want to engage and use those other muscle groups. I should actually train and implement that. Who here has changed their exercises, changed their workouts to help this? Anybody? Has anybody thought about it? Have you thought about changing your exercises for it? Or you've thought about it, you've tried, and you still can't utilize those other muscle groups. It is hard. And so that's why you have to change what exercises you're typically trying to do. And you have to modify them so you actually pattern and promote that glute function, promote that hamstring function. And so as we look at our exercises, as we look at our typical workouts, you need to think about getting those glutes to work, getting those hamstrings to work. One of the best ways of doing that is adding in a hip hinge to your workouts. Adding in that hip hinge to encourage your glutes to work. So just if you're able to, pop up, and I want you to give me a squat. Give me a couple squats for that. And I want you to think about what are the things that you feel, what are the things that you think that you should feel for it. As you do the squats, are you feeling just your quads? Your quads should work in a squat. They should. But you can pattern in such a way. Right now we're not loaded. We're air squatting right now. Okay? This is a very important note of this. As you do this modification, I'm not loaded through it. I have no weight on my back, no weight on my front. I'm not holding anything, okay? And so as you're doing this, allow your trunk to hip hinge forward a little bit more. And now drive up. As you do that, you can see I'm shifting the load into my hips a little bit more. And I'm driving up through them a little bit more. This is one way that I actually have ladies on the team change how they're using their glutes, how they're using their lower body. Adding in a little hip hinge in certain exercises can change how you're activating those glutes, how you're activating your lower body through that. So there's a lot of exercises, going back to the squat, that you can change just ever so slightly that make you add in your glutes better, that make you add in your hips, your hamstrings, and your calves a little bit better. And so those are ways that you actually modify your workouts instead of having them so quad dominant to make them fit you and what you need. Whenever you train, it's looking at why you're training, what you need for that, and as you're doing it for a specific thing. Looking at it versus just going through the motions, like every YouTube video out there, or any workout program, is it targeted for what you need? Those are the key points within that. Don't just waste your time doing different exercises that make you even more quad dominant. Guys are not like this. It's perfectly fine if they work their quads a ton more because they integrate and use their glutes too. Like on a typical as a whole. Yes, they still have problems here and there. I see several of them in my clients as PT, but it's not as difficult for them to integrate that. So, no, that's how you start correcting it. Now, as we apply it to the bike, there's a couple different things. Your skills on the bikes play one. Your body, strength-wise, what are you able to integrate? And then your mind. Those three come together and apply to your bike, right? As we look at how you're thinking about your pedal stroke, it's what you're encountering, what you're doing. Are you able to get out of the saddle and climb over roots? You know what that is? That's like part of a lunge, part of a step up. Have you ever thought about that? It's a single leg movement, single leg activity. Same thing with your pedaling as you're going down. You're not just like slamming that pedal down to the ground. They always talk about like if you go to a clinic or if you take any coaching skills classes for it, like wipe the poop off your shoe or brush the bottom of the ground. And what they're trying to make you do is to not just like jam your pedal forward and down, just straightening your knee, through that, but they're trying to get you to actually extend your hip through that. And so if you think about actually propelling yourself forward, or as you're doing some of those lunges, propelling yourself forward through that. Yes, it's a different thing that's moving. My body is moving in the lunge, but my foot is moving in the pedal stroke, but it's the same thing. It's that hip extension that we're looking for. And so thinking about that mentally to apply to your body, because you've done the exercises in your training to help you know how to do that off the bike, makes it so much easier to apply it to the skills when you need it on the bike. Or even just cruising up a fire road, or a little slight increase to the trail. Makes it easier to engage that. Another one, if you haven't looked at it, haven't seen it, my posture video I did last week talks about a ton of this stuff. And that's also how you can apply it to the bike. making sure you have a stable base to move the pedal, core, hip function, quad function, calf function, all of those things coming together is also key. And that comes in with your posture for it. Are you stable? Are you controlled on the bike? Or are you kind of like loosey-goosey flopping all around for it and trying to compensate everywhere? And so applying the exercises to your bike, thinking about that hip extension, or as the coaches talk about, including me, like wiping that if you have dog poop on your foot, wiping that off at the bottom of the pedal stroke to get some of that hip extension for it, get some of that knee flexion for it, and to not just drive straight down with that quad. It has to be something you think about because right now you're so used to doing it the other way. And so you have to retrain your motor patterns, but retraining them off the bike is very key to retraining them for on the bike. That's when those worlds combine and help you with your skills. There's so many ladies who join the team and they say 2 weeks later, oh my gosh, I feel so much of a difference on my bike. It's because they're actually learning that control, they're learning that stability, and they're applying it. Yes, it takes time to gain strength. It takes time to completely change these habits. Not every single ride is going to feel that way because, I mean, let's be honest, strength takes 6 to 12 weeks to start to happen, you know? You don't gain strength for the first 6 weeks, but you gain motor control. You gain that brain to body kick. So I challenge you, think about your training program. Think about what you're doing. Think about if you are still doing quad dominant exercises that are going to keep that pattern going for you. Quad exercises in themselves are not bad. Let me just make that clear. I'm not saying don't ever do a quad exercise. That's not true, okay? But you need to make sure that you're integrating and not just doing quad exercises. Making sure that you're not, what I talked about to somebody earlier, you're not quadifying everything, aka making everything a quad exercise for it. Has this been helpful? Has this opened anybody's eyes for this? About what things you can do for this super common and also potentially thing that's going to cause you knee issues, going to cause you different hip issues, going to cause you hip flexor issues, and just maybe even time off the bike or just limit you in your climbing ability. Because let's be honest, I mean, everybody wants to go out there and ride and have a good time and kind of release. I don't want to just feel held back from it. All right, y'all have a fantastic night. I hope this was super helpful for you, and y'all have a fantastic